discussion and action items, okay? Presentation of summary of the annual service efforts and accomplishments report. Sharon Winslow Erickson, City Auditor. Welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Would it be presumptuous if I asked to be able to sit down?
Oh, please,
Because
please,
I
please.
want to walk you through.
Yes.
Lori, could I come up here so I can actually see people's faces? Otherwise, I won't be able to see you if I sit down on the end next to Ernest. I don't know how he does it without seeing your faces. Because I wanted to try something a little new this time. First off, let me just introduce myself. So I am your city auditor. I've been your city auditor now since 2008. It is really lots of fun and a privilege to serve in San Jose in this capacity. Our job, for those of you who don't know our office, is to audit city programs. So we look at the performance, the effectiveness of city programs. I brought with me Mindan Vuong, who's one of the auditors in my office. He wanted to meet the commission as well and see what kind of use you might think you could make of the kind of work we do. So we're one of those offices that mostly sits at City Hall and looks over the bureaucracy. They occasionally let us out into the community so that we can actually evaluate the services you get. But it's always good for me to come and talk to folks like you who are actually out there in the community. I think it gives, I want to make a presentation to you, but I do hope that it's interactive because I learned so much from people out there in the community. You know, we can analyze services, we can run spreadsheets, and we can model it, and we can graph it. But you're the folks who actually live with it out in the community. So it's so important. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to come and speak to a group like this. So first off, I wanted to let you know before I get into the service efforts and accomplishments report, which I hope you all now have a copy of, I want to mention a few other audits that we do. So this report that we're going to talk about tonight is a little different than most of our audit reports. So I just wanted to mention a few that we've issued recently and just pass those around so you can see the kind of work that we do. So for example, back last March, we issued an audit of library hours and staffing. We were looking for ways to improve efficiency in library hours and staffing so that we can get all of our branch libraries open once more, at least 5 days a week, and I'm hoping at least on Saturdays. So this is the kind of report that we do. It's pretty thick. Descriptive report, we work closely with city staff to do that kind of work. We did another audit back in August of 2014, August of last year, which was on customer call handling. I don't think I need to tell you that resident access to city services needs to be modernized and improved. We took a look at it. It's really hard to figure out who in City Hall to call when you have a problem. It's really hard to get through the phone trees that we have, the voicemail systems. Some departments have them, a lot of departments don't. Where they do have them, we're recommending that they also answer the voicemail system. So if you have voicemail, you've got to listen to it. And then we did recommend additional language accessibility for residents whose primary language is not English. I have to tell you a little story about that recommendation. So it turns out the city has a contract with this vendor called Language Line that can do these three-party conversations. Most city staff didn't really know that we had that. So as we were finishing up our audit and we were preparing to write our report, people started finding out about this Language Line. We were talking about it, we were asking about it, and they started swapping the phone number back and forth. And before we could even issue the audit report, additional departments had set up their own agreements with Language Line to make sure that they could answer calls efficiently and effectively. It is, it's frustrating for you sometimes to call City Hall. It's equally frustrating for city staff when they don't know how to speak the right language to speak to you as well. Another one I want to mention to this committee was development services. We looked at improving the experience for homeowners. My office figured, again, we sit here in City Hall, but we figured, at least from our perspective, the big guys, the developers, probably know how to work the system. We were concerned about homeowners whose only experience with City Hall could be trying to get a building permit. So we looked at how we could improve that experience and made a number of recommendations. And then finally, we audited facilities maintenance. Again, I don't think I need to tell you that the city has a large number of facilities out there that may or may not be regularly maintained. We found that the wait times for maintenance were very long out there in far-flung facilities, and that the city really has underinvested in those facilities. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about some of the reports we do. Each one of our reports has recommendations to the City Council. We present them in public to the City Council. The City Council generally accepts the report and the recommendations and then sends us back to work with city staff to actually make the changes that we're recommending and improve the situations we found. So my office and my staff we can write beautiful reports and we can have all these great recommendations, but I know what matters to you all is when the service is actually improved. So we do follow up on recommendations every 6 months. I regret that we have a lot of open audit recommendations, and to me that signals places where we could improve city services. So we keep working on that. You've got my office, there are 15 of us up there. We cost you about $2 million a year, but we think that we actually end up saving you money. Our target is to save $4 for every dollar that you spend on us. But again, you only save money if we can get those recommendations implemented that we've made. So that's a little bit about the office. And then the part that I came actually tonight to talk about, and I'll try and keep this pretty brief, was about our service efforts and accomplishments report. Now this is a pretty big report. I think it's about 130 pages worth. So we do make copies available to the public. It probably contains a lot more information than any one of you may want on any one particular service. But let me start by saying, if I gave you each, I used to say $10, but that's not going to work anymore. If I gave you each $60 to go buy a pair of shoes, you would all come back with a different pair of shoes. Somebody would buy dress shoes, somebody would buy red shoes, somebody would buy black shoes. You're all coming back with a different kind of shoe. I figure my job as the auditor is to help give you information that you can use to buy the right pair of shoes, or in this case, to buy the right city service. I figure I can't tell you necessarily what level of police response time you want, or what level of building permit timeliness you want. You're going to have to tell your city council members that. But what my office can do is give you information that you can use to help make that decision. So with that goal in mind, I thought I'd kind of walk you through a little bit of how you might want to use this report, because I figured if you're a good case study. So a lot of people, a lot of groups, I would just take a PowerPoint presentation and I tell you what I thought. But I know this is an engaged group of residents who will be interested in yourselves telling the council what you want, so you probably don't need me telling you that. But I can, I hope, give you some tools to make those arguments better. So it is an independent, impartial assessment of city services. On the very first page, what we tell you, and I'm just going to walk you through a little bit of this, so bear with me, it gets a little more interesting. Very first page, it tells you how much money the city spends on operating expenditures per resident. So we spend, in the middle of the page here, about $1,336 last year per resident. So that's how it breaks down. Of that, about $305 went for police. You can see the listing here. About $73 went for transportation, about $30 for library. So that's a piece of information for you to judge. Again, so if I give you $1,300, where would you spend money? Same as my shoe example earlier. And then on page 6,
What is that second line of general fund, citywide general fund capital transfers?
yeah, so citywide is this problem. This is an argument I keep having with the budget office, and I know this is more than you want to know. So the city budgets for departments in kind of columns, and they're all chapters in the budget book. So if you go to the budget hearings, you're going to see those chapters. Then there's this big chapter in the back that's called citywide. And those are, $5 million for police overtime. It's different things that the council is deciding to set aside that aren't directly allocated to a department. So when you go to talk to a department head, you can hold them accountable. So the police chief, he's responsible for spending that $305. There's a bunch of other money over in citywide that I'm working with the budget office to be able to allocate that so we can see what the full cost is for each of these departments. But it's an argument.
So it's miscellaneous, and it's some of this and some other things.
Miscellaneous, some other things. It's also transfers for capital projects, although there aren't that many of those in these times. There are some workers' compensation costs that aren't, so those are workplace injury costs that are allocated citywide instead of being allocated to departments. So it's a wide variety of things. This report, I hope, is getting better over time. This is, I believe, the 7th time we've done it, and every year it gets a little better, and we get the information better. And every time I come to a group like this, I start marking up my copy of the report. I will circle on my personal copy when I get back to the office the word citywide, and we will see if we can address that question in next year's report. Okay, so page 6, yeah.
Does that money get allocated at the end of the year then when you're?
Yeah, generally it is allocated during the course of the year and is spent. Anything in any of these lines, so these are actually, this money was all spent. So it was actually allocated because these are actual expenditures. Any budget item that doesn't get spent, the money does what we call fall to fund balance. So it goes back into kind of the checking account and then can be spent next year. So if they give me $100 to spend and I only spend 80 of it, 20 of it goes back, it just stays in the general fund, it's not spent. So that's the difference between budgeted expenditures, what you think you're going to spend and what you actually spend. Makes sense? Okay, page 6. So if you turn to page 6, this is about the National Citizen Survey. So the National Citizen Survey is a nationwide survey that's administered in jurisdictions across the country. And we participate in that survey. So last fall, 3,000 written surveys were sent out to San Jose residents on a randomly selected basis. Those surveys were in English, Vietnamese, and Spanish. 469 residents responded to the survey. So we have statistically valid, what do people think? Now, that gives me the general thing. It still pays to come to talk to groups like this to find out what people really think. Because this is just a multiple choice kind of a survey, so it's pretty relatively inexpensive to do. So we've been doing it every year to keep our finger on the pulse of what people are thinking about. One thing of interest here, so on the right-hand corner, or right-hand side of page 6, you can see San Jose as a place to work is way up there at the top. Shopping opportunities is way up there. Pretty interesting, not rocket science, but look way down on the bottom. Cost of living in San Jose, rated lowest among those kind of quality of life indicators. So again, this is just to give you a sense of, and then the survey asks specific questions about many of our departments, each department, and you'll see that information sprinkled through the document. Pages 12 through 14 give you a sense of some of what's been going on in the last decade. So the last decade, San Jose has faced significant budget shortfalls. So every year, the city manager reports to the city council how much money they have to spend. And the city manager says, but we had planned for this much, and there's a shortfall, so something's got to give. So on page 12, you can see the change over a 10-year period in department budgets. So those are what happened to their budgets. You can see most people at this point are actually up. Most departments are actually up in their budgets, so those numbers are in the black. But then you can see what happens in the upper right-hand corner there. So those are the general fund shortfalls over the last 10 years. And there were years where it hit $118 million. Council had to cut out of the budget, $100 million. It went on for a long time. So when you have a grouchy council member, that's probably why. Those people got elected to provide service to the community. I don't think any of them expected to have to be facing those kind of shortfalls. One of the things that happened during the last decade, you'll see on the bottom right-hand corner of page 12, is city staffing. You can see we went from about 7,000 and some positions down to 5,000 and some positions. So, you know, I complain bitterly about how long you have to wait when you call City Hall, but that's part of the reason. We have a lot fewer people answering phones or providing service anymore. On page 13, you can see just some more statistics about departmental staffing. So the cost of departments went up, but the staffing has been going down. It's the cost of benefits, the cost of employees. But you can see the staffing is down. A place like the airport is down by 50%. When I looked at parks at one point, they were down almost 50%. I think they've bumped back up a little bit since then. So you can see the problems that we're having at City Hall with staffing. I put those numbers out there, number one, so that residents can understand what's going on with City Hall. It's also because we're providing a lower level of service, and this provides just some background information about that. Just to point out, page 14, there's a lot of talk around these days about turnover at City Hall. Here's a graphic that shows you the turnover over the last 15 years at City Hall. So on the left-hand side of that page, you can see those years in 2010, 2011, when the city was actually laying off employees. That's the dark blue. And you saw people leaving city employment. They didn't get laid off, but they knew their position was going to be cut. So anybody who could went out and got a new job in advance of being laid off. So you can see those dramatic, that exodus of people from the city. Let me just say that's years and years of experience. So sometimes there's good reasons people leave. There's also bad reasons people leave, and that's a lot of years of experience that left the city over the last few years. The turnover is still, it's back down from that, of course, but it's still pretty high. Then the rest of the report goes through different departments, and I just wanted to walk you through a few of those. So the airport department, we'll start with the A's. It starts on page 19. On page 20, you can actually see some of the different information that we provide you. And again, I apologize, it's probably more information than you want to know. But for a person who really cares about airports, they may dive deep into this one. It tells you authorized positions. It tells you their budget. You can see the 10-year trend. So on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see airport operating expenditures. That's how much money they were spending. And then you can see their authorized positions. So that's their authorized staffing. You can also see in that third graphic, if you're looking at the bottom of that page, their outstanding debt and annual debt payment. It is of concern to your auditor that the airport faces, so they've renovated the airport. They took on a lot of debt. The debt service is about $98 million a year. And they're having trouble keeping their regional air traffic. So we all know how hard it is to get flights out of San Jose. A lot of people end up going to San Francisco to get something other than a red-eye flight. That's definitely impacting our airport. It was expanded, and you know that the bottom kind of fell out of the airline market at the same time. So this gives you some information. You can see information about the airport. So unless there's any questions about that one, why don't we, I wanted to point you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
One question, what about income?
Yeah, so the income to the airport is on page 20, on the right-hand side in the middle of the page. That's airport operating revenue. And again, it may be more information than you want to know, but what was fascinating to me
All right.
is the airlines is only the bottom part. So it's only that bottom orange part. The airport actually makes a lot of money off of parking. I know it. Parking and concessions. I didn't realize how much Starbucks costs. So that's where they get, and then the top of that is other federal grants and that kind of thing. So you can see for each of these departments, we've tried to include as much information as we could. Page 33 is economic development. So the city has an economic development department. We're trying to get jobs into the city, trying to make sure people are employed. I did want to point out one other reason why San Jose has some problems. On page 33 on the top right-hand corner, you can see sales tax revenue per capita. This is a comparison with other cities. We try and do that where we can, is to compare to other cities, because it's hard for you to know, or for us to know, whether it's good or bad. So San Jose gets about $142 per capita, so per man, woman, and child in San Jose in sales tax. So the tax you paid on your automobile, that you bought last year, San Jose got $142 of that. So $142 per capita. You can see what's happening in some other jurisdictions here. So Palo Alto, a place like Cupertino, has 3 times the sales tax that San Jose has. Now, I heard on the radio the other day, not maybe reliable source, that Cupertino gets 20% of their general fund from Apple. So Apple, you know, when you have a major company, and this is one of the reasons why it's important to bring major companies to San Jose. If you have a major company that's doing a lot of sales out of your city, the city collects a lot of sales tax from that. So this is all part of the equation that goes into what the Office of Economic Development decides to do. So again, this little chapter will tell you what the city spends on economic development, and then what some of the benefits are, and then we try to give you some context about that. So that's economic development. Page 37. We're going to keep moving. So stopping. So environmental services department. So one thing I wanted to point out on this one, page 39 actually, tells you the tons. So we focus a lot about garbage and recycling in the city of San Jose. So here's some information about that. So we compare your average garbage rate. We look at how it's gone up over time. And then we actually look at the tons of solid waste landfilled versus the tons recycled. So we've got all these diversion figures and percentages. I figure at some point, I just wanted to know how many tons is it? So you can see here that those lines cross. So we actually in San Jose, we're landfilling less tonnage, the light green line, than we are recycling. I got that right. So we're recycling more. But you can see those lines start to come together. So one of the reasons my office does this report is because we notice stuff like that. So I was like, what the heck? We have all these zero waste goals, so why are these lines coming closer together? So we've launched an audit of that. We're looking at single-family recycling. Single-family right now has the lowest recycling rate, lower than multifamily and lower than commercial. Go figure. But so we're going to be looking at that to try and get to the bottom of that question. We do know that rates are important, so we include rate information on all of these, so how the rates have gone up over the last 10 years. Even though most of the rates stayed the same this last year, they're up significantly. We are worried about utility rates in San Jose, so the sewer rates in particular, because we're just launching a rebuild of our sewer system and the wastewater treatment plant. So those rates may be going up even more. The fire department starts on page 47 of the report. Page 49 of the report is a map of incidents by fire station area. So these are not the incidents that a particular station responded to, it's the incidents in the area. Because again, we were trying to write this from the residents' perspective. So it just shows you, we're trying to map more out. Typically, the city will tell you, we responded to 79,000 incidents. We wanted to break it down by area so we could see what areas, where we were responding in areas. And then pages 50 and 51 along the bottom of those pages shows you the responses by station area broken out by those. So you can see the emergency medical, the fire response and the medical responses by fire station if you know your fire station number. It also shows the response time for the various fire stations. And on this one, I did want to point out one interesting thing to us, which was on the top of page 51 in the right-hand corner. So there's been a lot of press about the fire department isn't meeting its response times. We wanted to look at some of the components of that. So in that top right-hand corner, you can see dispatch time. They're meeting the dispatch time. So that's the time from when you call 911 till they get out, they get it dispatched. So out of 911, out to the company that's going to answer the call. Then you can see turnout time is the next component to that. They're just under the target for that, but they're doing pretty well. Where they're having trouble is on the travel time. So it gives you some breakout again. Again, this report won't answer all of your questions. It doesn't fix the problem, but it at least gives people the information they need to maybe make some decisions. The next one I wanted to talk about was page 69 in the library. I can find page 69 myself. Okay, there's the library. Here's average weekly circulation by branch service area. So this is by these service areas. You can see the number of, on the bottom of the page, you can see the number of visitors in your branch library, and then it's graphed up above. You know, the average, our circulation has been going down. I was worried about that, but we've cut our hours dramatically. So we're only offering 4 days a week of service compared to 5 years ago, it was 6 days a week. Regular Sunday hours haven't been offered at any branch since July of 2010. So we think that's why circulation is down. We are seeing increased use of ebooks, that kind of thing. Those statistics are in here as well. So if you're interested in following what's going on with the library, that's in here also.
So I'm just curious, how is circulation measured? And the reason I ask that is I wonder if people are using the library but not necessarily to check out a book.
Right, so that's why we have circulation and we also have visitors. So the library, so community centers don't track the number of visitors, so there's no gate, but the libraries do track, so they know how many visitors they get.
Also, I've gone to other libraries because the local one was closed and none of them was open, so that kind of mixes the numbers too.
Yeah. I mean, everything we're seeing is that libraries, no matter how much we go online, no matter how many computer stations we put in, no matter how much people are buying books through Amazon, usage of libraries tends to go up. Our circulation is down, but the usage keeps going up. And I know I'm seeing all these nods. So, I mean, every time I go in a library in San Jose, there are huge numbers of people in there. So the idea that libraries have passed the way of dinosaurs is not, we're not seeing that in our statistics. The next one I wanted to talk about real briefly was Parks and Recreation. And the thing I wanted to point out here was actually page 75. So this is the part that concerns me, and it's on page 75 on the right-hand side of the page. The city owns 54 community centers. It operates a dozen. This is a list of the 54. The ones that are grayed out, the ones that are in bold are the ones the city is actually operating. There are limited hours in all of our community centers on Friday and Saturday. No city-run center has regularly scheduled Sunday hours. I don't need to tell you that. So we continue to be very concerned. And San Jose at this point has got a community center for every 100,000 people. Our neighboring jurisdictions have far more community facilities than that. Page 81 of the report, or page 80 and 81, gives you a sense of what's going on with development in San Jose. So you can see from some of these graphics that when the Great Recession hit, construction in San Jose just dried up. The Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement Department was one of those departments that was forced to lay a whole bunch of people off because they are supported by user fees, and there weren't any fees coming in because there wasn't demand for permits. The permit, they just dried up for a while. What you can see from this, though, is just the general slope of these curves. So you see these graphics over time where it drops way off during the Great Recession, and then it just starts climbing. So they're seeing incredible growth in the volume of construction, the value of construction in San Jose. So if you see a lot of cranes downtown or a lot of construction out in the neighborhoods, we're certainly seeing it at City Hall, and the planning department is certainly seeing it. One of their problems is they're having trouble staffing back up. They laid a bunch of people off. They lost a lot of experienced people. So we are seeing on page 81, the graphic up on the top right-hand corner talks about the timeliness of development services. They've got targets. They've reduced the target timelines, and they're still having trouble meeting those timelines. I think until they get their staffing back up and they build up some more experience among their staff, we're going to continue to see delays in timeliness.
Yeah.
Sharon, my husband is a small contractor. He has like about 6 people he works with, they work for him. And he has no trouble in Campbell, and he has no trouble in Los Gatos, but I can't tell you, he has screamed bloody murder and yelled, at Ash Kalra, our council person. And there was an incident recently where he went down there. It took him like 4 hours in 3 visits. Oh, sorry. Marie Arnold, District 2. He finally was, taken care of. But it's, that's time and money every time. And to, pat the person on the back and say, we're doing all we can. But we're just not getting the permit. And this incident, when he went down, somebody's dad died. Well, we all feel really bad about that. But the person who was taken over, they couldn't find the fellow's, work, my husband's permit. And so the person who was in that office was supposed to be the top of the office, and he didn't know where the desk was of the person. So, is the whole place goofy down there? Is it so brand new?
So we've issued an audit on development services, and again, we focused at single-family customers, but we found really long wait times. Because of where my office is, I walk through the lobby of City Hall a lot. There's always a long line of people out there. It was my good fortune in the middle of the audit. They should not do this in front of the auditor. There was some poor fellow on the lawn, sitting in there in his work clothes, standing in line on his cell phone, telling his boss, I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm number 10 in the line. So my office has got significant concerns about the length of time that you have to wait, the fact that you sometimes, and especially for folks from San Jose is a big city, and we go from one mountain range to the other, and everybody has to come down to City Hall. But you know what? We're only open, okay, I'll get these hours wrong, 8 to 5, and we're closed at noon.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
9 to 5, 4:30?
And the
They quit
person
taking
who's number
appointments at
10.
some point, and they're closed at noon. I think that's an issue. They have been, so I can say on one hand, it's an issue. We have open audit recommendations on that. We also have recommendations on, they've got to beef up their technology. Right now, they're storing the old building permit information on what they call a jukebox. Is that how you say it, jukebox? It's actually got tapes and an arm that comes out like a jukebox. They showed it to me. I mean, there is, so when you try to go online and see a building permit for an old building permit, if you've ever tried to do that, you know, for something in your neighborhood, you can stand there and wait and wait and wait. Next time you do that, remember that it's this little arm that's moving over to pick up this tape. So the IT staff, our technology staff, are actually buying spare parts for these machines as they see them on eBay. But meanwhile, they've got to buy a new system. And the city has just got to bite the bullet and buy that system. It's just, it all costs money. And the council, again, is trying to make these choices. They are very complicated choices. And that's why I'm here talking to you tonight, because I figure the more information we all have, the better choices we can advocate for. So if it's costing your husband money to stand in line, you know, I mean, it's costing a lot of people money to stand in line. And at what point are we better off funding an upgrade to those systems so that we can give employees, because if you're waiting at home, employees are doing that all day long. So we're wasting an incredible amount of staff time waiting for that arm on that machine to move around. I mean, it's no excuse for, you know, poor customer service. And, you know, my office is in there trying to advocate for improving customer service. We have got some significant issues to deal with in the planning department. It's true.
In my neighborhood, 3 homes burned down, and all those 3 homeowners had very negative experiences with planning department getting permits. Also, I'm doing remodeling. My contractor does not have good things to say about the permit process here. And then what adds to that is San Jose's permit costs are one of the highest in the area. So not only is the service poor, but the cost per permit, so you don't, you know.
Yeah, and let me just say, I am really, as an employee of the city, it distresses me to hear stories like that. Because I think everybody around here, their goal is to provide good service. I mean, ultimately, I mean, you're going to catch them on a bad day and they're going to be gripey. But most people work for the city because they want to provide good service. I don't think any of us are proud when we hear complaints like that.
Well, it's an incentive for people not to get a permit and have things done, you
Yeah.
know, not.
No, and that was one of my major concerns, you know. We looked at the number of water heater permits. Nobody's getting a water heater. I mean, you just look at the number of them, and yeah, well, it costs you almost as much to get the permit as it does to get the water heater. So we have got to solve those problems, because I could argue, now some people will argue, why do I even need a water heater permit? On the other hand, the city is in this business to help protect residents. So not your husband, but there are unscrupulous people out there who won't correctly connect the gas line. And the city has a role in that. That was the whole point of this, and I think we just got to get back to that point. Yeah?
I'd like to say,
Yeah?
I'll tell you a good story. My next door neighbor came over yesterday, and she's remodeling her house. And the inspector came in and said that they needed more electrical outlets. And so she went online and couldn't figure out how to complete it. She had done it before. So she emailed the gal in the office and said, please let me know or walk me through it. And next time she gets this little message saying, it's done, all you have to do is print it out. So she had done it all for her. And she says, just print it out and give it to the inspector when he comes. So something good.
Whoa. More of those stories.
I'm going to give you one too. Terry
Okay.
Martin, District 9.
Now you started.
No, I'm an architect, so I deal with the city on a lot of different projects, residential and commercial. I will tell you it is getting better. we're not having the wait times that we did, and we can actually get through, and there's actually somebody in the planning department to talk to. This is huge.
Can I also offer something? My name is Nicole Andreas. I'm in solar, and San Jose has the best solar permitting in the area. It's over the counter, and our experience with San Jose has been excellent.
Yeah, you know, we noticed that when you bid on solar, my only beef with the solar was, why do we even make you come in?
I think there is a good case. I mean, you're dealing with electrical systems. I mean, I would say,
No, I mean, you could do it
oh,
online.
I see. We're happy with over the counter. We're gonna stay with that.
You know, I figured nobody wants to rock the boat when it's working, but
Exactly.
I was like, because we kept seeing these same people showing up day after
Yes.
day, it's like their job is to come and stand in
I
line.
think they have crushes on each other.
It was so interesting. Okay, so this is all good to hear, thank you so much. So the police department, we've all heard a lot about the police department, so page 85, I wanted to point you to crime stats. So crime in San Jose, you know, one thing we told the council when we issued this report was that San Jose has now moved back down below the US and California averages in terms of major violent property crime. So those are FBI statistics. Last year, we were very sorry to have to report that the city of San Jose had moved above both the national and state averages. We're back down below that average. That doesn't mean that we're great. We're just below the state and California average. What we did see was a spike in property crime. So let me show you some of that. So on page 85, there are a number of graphics. One I wanted to point you to was this major crimes graph on the bottom left-hand side. So that'll show you the major violent crimes stayed pretty flat along the bottom. They actually didn't grow all that much in aggregate. So different pieces of crime moved differently, but in aggregate. Where you saw that spike up was in the property crime. So it is down a little bit this year from where it was in this year's report, from where it was the year before. It's nowhere close to back down to where it was previously. I also wanted to point out on page 86 and 87, we've got detail on calls for service and response times by district, by police district, and there's a map of the districts there so you can see your neighborhood, some of the response times and the number of calls for service. I did want to point out on page 87, one of the things, you know, if people can argue about whether or not having more cops deters crime, or whether having more cops, is that going to stop homicides? But I think nobody disagrees with the fact that we all want to be able to dial 911 and have a police officer show up if we do have an emergency. So I feel pretty strongly about response times. And in the center of the page, on page 87, it gives you the average priority 1 response time. So these are emergencies in process. You need somebody right away. And then next to it, you can see the graph of priority 2 response times, which are the lesser emergencies. What I see the department doing through these statistics is doing what they can to protect priority 1. So if you call, there's a crime in progress, they're going to try their darndest to get there in that 6-minute average response time. What's happening is that priority 2 call time, you know, it used to be down at 8 minutes. The target of the department is 11 minutes, and they're up around 20 minutes at this point, and that's on average. So these are averages. So that means for every person who got a real quick response time because the cop was around the corner down the street, there's somebody else who may be a really long time. So it's sad to see those numbers move that way, but it also makes me incredibly proud of the police force that we do have, that they are protecting the key core service that we all desperately want. That's the police department.
I had a question. I was looking in here to see the impact of the community service officers now that we've started hiring them. I live in District 8, Matt Mullen, District 8, and, in our area in District Hall, we've had some of the biggest spikes in property crimes, and even as recently as last month, there was a major gas line failure, and I drove past it, and all of the police officers that I saw on the streets handling the closing and the redirecting of traffic were all the community service officers. So we're seeing a lot more of them.
You know, that's something, I'm blanking on when they all came on board. So this report is as of June 30th, 2014. So it's we run it by fiscal year. So I think they all came on board in July, but I just made myself another one of those notes to make sure that next year we start tracking what's going on with the CSOs. That's a great comment, good suggestion. Thank you.
Actually, I think they were trained and started being deployed in about August of 2014.
Yeah, so we should be able to see it in in next year's report, so in this current fiscal year.
I had a question. Is there a breakdown of the staffing throughout the years, the last couple of years?
You know, we've got authorized staffing. Boy, you know, I'm trying to remember where we ended up with. I think we ended up, so we plotted on the bottom of page 84, it shows you authorized staffing. So there's sworn staff and civilian staff. In the paragraph up above, we talk about the problem. So in the second paragraph, talk about the problem of street ready. You know, those numbers, the problem in graphing them is those numbers keep changing. They change every month. And if we were to graph them, I mean, I suppose we could do like a monthly trend, but it's pretty hard to see the vacancies. It'd be a snapshot in time. So let me think about that one though, because I think that's a huge issue that we're going to need to be following. So when we talk about, you know, San Jose sworn staff per 10,000 residents, 100,000 residents, we're talking about authorized, not actual.
And I have one more question. Is there a part on here where it ranks where San Jose officers are paid as compared to different cities?
No, we have not included that in this report. I've seen some of those numbers. I haven't seen any official city document listed. I may just not have seen it listing pay for other jurisdictions. I know different people have come to the city. I think I saw them at a city council meeting with pay. But we haven't included that in this report.
I'll just comment on that and then ask my question. So that's sort of along the lines of whether we measure our ability to compete. And I think what we're saying is we don't really, in terms of the police department. I don't know about, I'm sorry. What I was saying was that, what I heard is that the question was along the lines of whether we measure our ability to be competitive, and that we don't necessarily do that at this time in terms of the police department. So it'd be interesting to know whether in the future we want to measure our ability to compete. And I just had a question looking at the stats. I know we covered them, but it took me a little while to go back to page 85. And I know that we are below the national and state average. And what average is that? I don't know if that's for larger cities, for all cities. What average is it?
That is all cities. So it's all reporting jurisdictions within the state of Pitt. So it's from the FBI's database. So you can go online and we don't have the link in there. You can go online and you can actually link to that page and you can see the FBI statistics, and that's what we're using. So it's been a long-standing measure that San Jose has used. I think several of us are wondering whether or not we should be lumping together violent crime and property crime, and exactly how it's measured and whether it's measured in terms of big cities or not. Because big cities are very different than some small cities. Yeah, and that's why we keep trying to, without making the report too much longer, we keep we keep making the font size smaller. Trying to fit more information in here, and these kinds of questions help us decide what we should include in subsequent years.
Thank you.
I did want to point out, this is an example, just so you know, page 88 shows perceptions of safety in San Jose, and it shows, so we're doing this survey over time, and we're going to keep tracking how safe people feel in San Jose. I think part of this is how quickly police respond, but it also really matters how all of us feel about being safe in San Jose. I just wanted to point you to that information as well. A lot of people have questions about retirement costs, so we did include some information about retirement costs. So that's shown on page 98 and 99 of the report. Let me say that pension costs just continue to be a challenge. The city owes about $3.3 billion in unfunded liabilities for pension and retiree health care. We owe about $240,000 per federated member, that's the non-sworn people in the city, and more than $350,000 per police and fire member. So that's the amount that should be in the bank right now that isn't. So it continues to be a challenge. There's some basic information here about pension costs. Have they gone up? Have they gone down? The number of retirees and so on. So if you have questions about that, I'm always happy to talk about pension costs, but I just wanted to point you to that information. And then finally, the last one I wanted to point out was the Department of Transportation. So the zoo is actually in the parks. So zoo isn't the last one, it is the Department of Transportation. Just a little joke. The Department of Transportation, it's interesting to me that one of the key measures they track is fatal and injury crash rate. When you think about it, that's one of the key things. We want to be safe when we travel. So I'll complain a lot about a pothole, but what I really want to make sure is that all of us are safe out there on the roads. So on page 103 in the top right-hand corner, you can see San Jose's fatal and injury crash rate per 1,000 residents. It has been drifting down over time, which, any injury or fatality is of course devastating, but we are a lot below the national average, and we continue to basically trend down, which is a good thing. I also wanted to point out on page 104 and 105, we're looking at street condition. My office is also working on an audit of street condition as we speak. We're getting ready to publish that at the end of the month. Here on page 105 is the first ever, I believe, map of street condition on a block-by-block basis in San Jose. So this information is up on the web in a PDF so that if you go on the website, you can, I do it with my mouse, zoom in. It's not a map, so, but you can zoom in and you can actually, if you can get your bearings, you can see what your street condition is. We are working on being able to put up a zoomable map so that you could actually go in and you could query what's the street condition on my street, when was that last maintained, and so on. What this shows you is, what I see when I look at this map is a lot of orange and red. And those are streets in at-risk, poor, or failed condition. That means it's going to cost us a lot of money to fix those streets. So a street that's in the blues, in the excellent, very good, or good, is going to be a street that the city could just, once every 10 years, go along and paint a slurry seal over it, that black tar they put on top, and we'd be in good shape. For a lot of years, and you can keep doing that, and you can stay ahead of the cycle. San Jose has fallen behind the cycle, and there's a lot of streets where you can keep patching the potholes, but at some point you're going to have to rebuild. So, and speaking of potholes, one of everybody's favorite measures is how many potholes did you fill last year, and that's shown on the bottom right-hand corner of page 104. I need to say that in 2012. The crews went out and they did a blitz, and they really filled a lot of potholes, and that's where you see it's way up there at the top. If you talk to the pavement crews, so the people that we've got on City Pay who are out there filling potholes, They will also tell you, though, that filling potholes efficiently and effectively isn't going to solve our problem. So they can come out and they can fill a pothole, but if that street needs to be replaced, they said on the one hand, it makes them look really good when they fill a lot of potholes, but they said it's not good for residents because it's a signal that we're going to have to get in there at some point and repave those streets, which is an expensive proposition. So as good as it makes them look, they know long-term it's probably not a good way to go. So the way
Yes, I called in a street transportation. My name is Robert Sample, District 7. And this street is Terlane. And driving that street, you'd have to navigate into the other lines and everything to avoid those potholes. I counted 14 potholes. Anyway, I called it in. Unfortunately, I couldn't believe it. The crew was out there Thursday of last week filling the potholes. But, to my surprise, they only filled it in with gravel. Gravel. Now that the cars are hitting that gravel, it's bouncing around the street. I was really surprised that they didn't use liquid tar or whatever and fill it up right. But they filled it up with gravel only.
Yeah.
Take a look at it. In fact, I can bring a picture down to City Hall or you and take a picture of it and show you exactly. But they did come out and fill the whole potholes.
Well, that's good, but since I just bragged them up, I'm feeling a little guilty. You know, you can always take pictures. You know, if you have the graffiti app on your smartphone,
yes.
you can actually use that to take a picture and send in another kind of a complaint. There's kind of another button on there someplace. But you know, if I were you, I'd take the picture and send it in to to transportation. And
okay, I will. I'll do it again.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that's kind of the end of our report, and I just wanted to, you know, what I told the City Council, we presented them a little PowerPoint. I didn't walk them through all of this, but I told them, you know, after a decade of deficits and shortfalls, the city's finally starting to turn the corner, I hope, and restore some services and some staffing, but it's a long way, as we're seeing in these graphics, to get us back up to where we were before, and certainly even that may be below where we want to be. The City Council has set a goal of returning services to a January 2011 level at a minimum, but that may be far below where we think it should be. They still face significant challenges. So this report is a little different than the rest of our reports. We don't have any what we call findings or recommendations. It's informational. It's intended to alert people. It's actually intended to force people to ask questions. That's the goal of this report. It is on the web, so at www.sanjoseca.gov and then /SEA for service efforts and accomplishments. And then let me just say, all of our audit reports are up on the web at city's website /auditor. So please feel free you can reach me at sharon.erickson@sanjoseca.gov, I think it is. Or if you forget my name or can't spell it, it's city.auditor, sanjoseca.gov. If you have suggestions or comments about this report in particular, you know, me and my staff are not the department staff, so we can't answer all the questions about why they filled the pothole with gravel. But what we can do is, you know, give you any backup information if you have questions. We can maybe help you if you decide to do a research project on some part of city service. We may be able to at least point you in directions. My office does work under a work plan that's accepted by the Rules Committee. So the Rules Committee of the City Council gives us a list of larger audit projects like the library hours project. And if you ever want to request an audit, you can either email me or you can email your council person, ask them to request an audit. You know, we have limited staff, so we never get around to all the things that should be audited. But if I don't hear from you, I don't know which of the things you care about and which things we should audit. So again, thank you for your questions and time. I really appreciate it.
Okay,
I think we have a few more.
so let me do them in order here. I say him first. So, David?
Kind of an odd question off the wall. If citywide expenses, if there was $10 million available out of that fund, or whatever, is there a way to go through this audit, the information you have, and generate some kind of, if you had that bucket of money in a priority, where you could spend it with a return on investment, and this one would give you X times return on investment, this would give you next and next and next, for the council to look at, for the community to look at, as opposed to them all reaching into the bucket saying mine's more important?
You know, we could try to do a priority list on that. What we would have to do first, I'm thinking out loud here, is figure out what things would have a return on investment. And that's sometimes really hard. So if we put another police officer on the street, what's the return on investment? Now, I can tell you, you know, if some things are going to be easier for people like me who are kind of data people to calculate. I mean, I can tell you if you spend, you know, $1 million on this computer system or on outfitting all your crews with smartphones, you could probably save this much time and you'd see a payback. But other stuff is just so hard to measure. How do you measure the value of having a community center closed in a kid's neighborhood for their entire childhood?
Well, you said that you got $4 for every $1, so we should put all the money in you and.
You know, and my staff hates it when I say this, but, you know, yeah, you could put all the money in me and I could hire all these great people to do all these cool audits. But if it doesn't fix, if the problems don't get fixed,
Right.
you know, so I mean, if somebody gave me $10 million, I'd probably say, buy this system and do that and do this. I mean, I would be playing the same game that you all play when you're going in front of the council and advocating for a particular program. I mean, there is no way to rank. It is just very hard to rank these things against each other. If you've been to the budget games that the council has been playing, you know how hard that is.
Okay, Karen.
On page 33, your calculation of these different cities and how much, I had a hard time correlating that. You got a Palo Alto with $370. Is that because people from outside Palo Alto are going in there spending money, or?
Yes, so it's because Palo Alto people, I suspect, now I don't know this for sure, but here's what we all think. Palo Alto people are going to the shopping center in their town to spend money.
Right.
They're not going to a different shopping center.
Right.
So if you're a San Jose resident and you go to the wrong side of Valley Fair Mall, that, I didn't mean that way, but you know, the other side of Valley Fair, that money is going to Santa Clara.
Oh, they don't?
No.
Oh, I thought they aggregated.
No. So if you go to a Safeway that's across the border, that money is going to that jurisdiction. So the money is going to the jurisdiction in which the sales transaction took place. Another thing that's happening is some cities have a lot more of what I was saying, this what we call business to business. So Apple Computer, HP selling printer ink. That's all, you know, I mean, you see those other kinds of things. We suspect, the Office of Economic Development has been looking at this, they suspect that San Jose residents are spending quite a bit of sales tax dollars outside of San Jose. So you are shopping? Okay.
Well, when you go to Florence, you go to Campbell rather than the one up by Berryessa.
Right, right. So I think there's some of that happening, so making sure that we have the right retail mix and the right business mix in San Jose. This is not something you can change quickly, but it has to do with the land use patterns in San Jose and where we shop.
Norma.
My name is Norma Callender from District 2, and I contacted you some time ago, and this is just a small little marble in the bucket about monies that I thought had been missing at the South Side. And so I have a thank you to you, because I know you fixed the problem by having the seniors pay for their membership, and then they go into a bucket in the city, but then you would allocate those for the city, for the different centers. And I want to thank you, although they still complain that I caused the problem. I looked at it as a problem that was rectified, because if you recall at Southside, we were missing something like $3,000. But everything was so convoluted, I don't think you could even get to the bottom of what happened. So what you did, you went in and cleaned out all of the centers, and you set up a system whereby you know where the money goes. And so I have a thank you.
Thank you so much.
One number I'd like to see, your number on chart 6, the quality of life, different things, compare it over time to see what the trends are.
Yeah, good point.
Yes, the cost of living is high here, but is it getting better or is it getting worse? Things like that.
You need me to ask a survey consultant?
No, but I mean, how much worth? I mean, you have the data for each year?
Yes, yes, good point. Good point.
Nice. So I have public comment from Ed Rast.
Ed Rast. Has the city done an audit of basically compensation, total compensation for middle-level employees, the people with the most experience? Because what I'm seeing is the people with the most experience in the planning department, the police department, all the other departments, they're all leaving when they hit somewhere between about 7 and 15 years, and definitely by the time they hit 20. So what I've looked at the numbers is looking at the other departments in those high-demand jobs, sewer department, planning, etc. They're paying a lot more money than we are in total comp when you look at it, especially when you take a look at the contributions the city employees have to make to a retirement plan and health care plan. So therefore, they're getting anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 increase in pay when they go to another city. Has the city looked at that at all? I got a second question.
So again, I'm not the departmental expert on this, but I do know that the Human Resources Department is looking at pay rates for various classifications. And there is some money in the budget to make some adjustments. I'm not confident that it's going to take care of that problem. San Jose has a compensation problem. You know, all employees took a 10% pay cut. And they're paying significantly more for health care, for benefits, for pensions. So that's hurting the city's ability to keep employees. As revenues increase, the city council has made various commitments to increase pay, but it's coming back over time. A lot of people still make less than they did a few years ago.
Sunshine Reform recommended that when we take a look at grants and subsidies and fee reductions and everything else, that you do cost-benefit analysis. Basically, you take a look at, as an example, they took $30 million of transportation infrastructure funds, which is supposed to go to fix the streets, and they ended up giving it back to the developers in North San Jose. The question you have is, what do we get for our money for that reduction? And the same thing happens with when you have other subsidies. I know that you do analysis of the nonprofits. My understanding is there's no analysis of all the subsidies, fee reductions, etc., that go to the for-profit companies or individuals. Is that correct?
Me and Dan may know this better than I. So we did have a recommendation to the Office of Economic Development that they begin reporting subsidies granted and actually used. One thing we found was that they were actually granting subsidies that had not been used. So all of us were thinking that they had used a subsidy, and actually it wasn't used.
So we've asked them to include that information. Dan, do you know if they've actually done that yet? No, not yet. So we are hopeful that that will begin happening. I know there is new legislation as well, either the state or federal level, that requires some kind of analysis when you do more than $1 million, I believe it is, in subsidies. And we are beginning to see those analyses come through. But yeah, it is a problem, and both of these would be great audit subjects.
Sunshine recommended for everything over 250. The last one is, anecdotally, I'll give you an example. My next door neighbor had his car broke into. He heard the noise. He's probably taller, bigger than anybody in this room. He's huge. And he runs out and he sees the guy breaking the car. The guy grabs his stuff and starts running down the street. He goes, chases him. When he gets partially down the street, he was running to his friend's car. One of the people got out with a knife. Okay? Luckily, he backed off and ran home. He called the police department, and their comment when he said, I just had my car broke into and somebody threatened me with a knife is, do you really want to make a report? There is mass underreporting going on in the crime here. Unless you're going to file a police report because you have insurance issues or other things, basically when you call in, it's very difficult to make reports. It's difficult to make them online, and they basically discourage you. And I've heard that same thing, not exactly that detail, over and over and over and over again. It's just not one anecdotal, it's a lot. Just for your information. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to ask about, you mentioned those subsidies. There's also the park fees that have been reduced for high rises, now mid rises, and be kind of curious how much that is over time, and are we getting benefits for it? I know it's important to some. Okay, any other questions on this? Yes, on.
I did. Then related to, I'm sorry, this is Juan Estrada, District 5, and related to the comment we heard from the public, then I just wonder, do you think that it's possible that the reduction in police staffing could result in fewer reports, meaning that the statistics would drop simply because of the reduction in police staff?
Yes, that is entirely possible. So, you know, what I'm going to think about and, you know, is how we track this underreporting of crime. I mean, and I'm thinking that it's in the questions that we ask residents, and I believe that we did ask whether or not they were the victim. I had thought, I'm just not finding it here, that we had asked people whether or not they were the victim of a crime and did they report it. And those statistics hadn't changed that much from year to year. But, you know, I'm hearing so many of these questions, you know, statistics, they pick a sample of people, and if you weren't one of those people, you know, it's, so I think it is something we need to be worried about. You know, if people are hearing this kind of comment, they're not potentially filing a report, and that then it's never going to make its way into the databases.
Question about community centers. You mentioned that there were.
I was going to say, did you have any comment about
that? It relates to crime.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a question in here about the report of crime.
Where?
Question number 7, at the very back of the actual survey. I don't know if it was put in the front, but the question was asked.
Yeah.
What was the question asked?
Page 829 of the back. Did you report crime?
829?
Yes.
Appendix 29, question 7.
And so, just to make sure, it sounds like that topic is a little different from what I asked. And what I asked was whether the staffing level would lead to a corresponding reduction or increase in reports. And I think what I heard is if, for example, you have half as many police officers, you should expect that fewer reports will be filed, meaning that the statistics will indicate a decrease. And so if that is possible, then it seems like a hard figure that you could calculate is reports per police officer, right? And so that would be a better measure perhaps.
Yeah, the other response I would have is we're not seeing decreases in calls for service in the police department, so people are still calling initially. I think what I'm hearing is these stories of people being discouraged from reporting. And that's the fall off that I am worried about, whether or not we're tracking, how we can track those statistics, because it didn't get reported. So somebody called in, we're seeing the calls coming in, but there's not necessarily action. So I think that's how it could reduce staffing, absolutely could. I just don't have any evidence one way or the other that it is having an impact or not.
Right, what I mean though is you could calculate the number of reports per police officer, right?
Yeah, but there could be a lot of reasons for that as well.
Oh, I'm not saying that there couldn't be, there's a lot of reasons for any statistic, it's
Yeah, but
that you
it's
could
really
measure.
good point.
Okay.
If these questions are the same each year, you could plot the divergence between were you a victim of crime and did you report it to the police?
Correct, I wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
Both of the questions are there, and she's saying there hasn't been a change over the years in that. So whether the staffing has gone up or down, the response has not changed, so it indicates that it's consistent. But I do understand the concern.
Okay, so Dave, you had a question, next topic.
What was the number of community centers open to close roughly?
We have 54 community centers and we're operating 12. So the others are, so I think we included in here kind of the status of the rest of them.
Right.
I don't have that off the top of my head. Actually, there they are. I mean, nonprofits and outside organizations, so it's on page 75. Nonprofits were operating 27 of them, so that means that those may have had limited hours. They may be open to the public, they may not. So some organizations may be using the community center for a different purpose. So when we think of a community center, I think of kids and ping pong, right? And that may or may not be happening if it's a nonprofit that has a different mission. And then 12 of the sites were being operated by other city programs or outside organizations. 3 sites were actually closed. So they've tried to keep as many open as they can, because if you just close a site down, it's just going to deteriorate. And besides, let's have somebody use it for something useful.
That was going to be my question. If San Jose is fundamentally a bedroom community of 1 million, working outside the city in large part, and people want to live here, and we are working on the housing problem, then any way that these could be opened, even by volunteers, nonprofits, and if we just relax the bureaucratic, legal, and other costs and restrictions and questions in the way that, it takes 3 years to answer a question, somebody could unlock it, use it, and families could organize, nonprofits, churches, anybody. To use them might just increase the level of community livability.
Yeah, that's a really fair point. One of my reactions has been, we have on our work plan for this year an audit of volunteers in the city. I just wanted to get a handle on how many volunteers we have. Are we taking advantage of those volunteers? Having said that, I think most people assume that you would have to have a base level of city staff to just make sure the facilities are properly used, unless you have an agreement with a nonprofit. So once you've got an agreement with the nonprofit's responsible for the facility. Otherwise, you need at least some portion of city staff, but then potentially, how can we make sure that we're using volunteers? Because I think everybody around here wants to help. So we want to get this city back up to the service level that everybody deserves, and people are willing to pitch in to do that. And I want to make sure we're making every opportunity available for people to do that.
Okay, last question.
Yeah. Partly a follow-up on the question he just asked is that a good example of community center reuse is the Meadowfair Community Center, which is technically in District 8, but it's right on the edge with District 7, and it's a very poor and underserved community. And daytime operation was taken over by Cadango Child Care. And this sounds like a good thing, and the community center is still available, and community meetings happen in the evenings and things like this. But one of the questions that was raised, and this might be a topic for future audits, is a child care center is being run there. How many of the children that are being served are from the surrounding neighborhood versus is this nonprofit or for-profit or whatever it is bringing in children from elsewhere because their parents can pay more? So, that would be a good question for these. And back to the prior questions about the police and whether or not crimes are being reported. One of the anecdotal things that I used to hear a lot was people would say, I called 911 and they said, we can't send somebody out to do a report. So the question is that call logged as a report, or is the actual physical report logged as a report? Because that's supposedly some of what the community service officer should be making an impact on.
Yeah, and just the brief answer to that is there is a difference between a call and an actual response. And we're trying to get clarity in this report on where those things diverge, because I think historically the city has called it calls for service because we responded to everything. But it's not necessarily, the call is not necessarily a response. So I know that these numbers do strip out duplicate calls, so 5 people call about 1 incident. But we're trying to get clarity in the report. And I think you'll see improvements in future years as well about what constitutes an incident and a response and a call. They're very different numbers.
Thank you. Okay, we need to get going. Very, very quick.
Very, very quick.
Very quick.
So just related, because I caught what you said earlier, and now I better understand. So 911 and other emergency calls went up 21%, and yet we saw a decrease in reports. And so that's the divergence we're talking about, and that's separate from a survey asking people what they think. So I see what we're saying. I think we're all saying that there were more calls for 911, and yet somehow fewer reports.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.